It is Wednesday, April 27th of 2022, and I promise that this one won't be about Birmingham, but might still be a little bit about the USFL. Today on Guy's Daily Drive, BAM! And welcome everyone to Guy's Daily Drive, the show that I don't do every day, but I am driving, and it's during my daily drive. So, I'm not exactly, it's not a lie, it's an omission. I'm not telling the full truth. The full truth would be that I do this 2 to 3 times a week, not daily. Though I suppose I could do it daily. But I don't really know what I could talk about that many days a week and still concentrate on driving. Because, the thing about creating online content, it's usually best if you know what it is you're going to talk about, or at least try to know what it is you were going to talk about. For example, I did not know that I was going to spend the beginning part of Guy's Daily Drive today talking about how hard it could be to create content for a daily live show. I didn't even think I was going to talk about that, but I did. Here I am. I'm talking about it. How weird is that? So, yeah, I have spent the last 3, 4, 5 Guys Daily Drives talking about the trip to Birmingham. And it's over. I went down, I watched some games, and I drove back. And I had a wonderful time. It was except for some of the traffic issues and just long drives in general, which can sometimes get a little boring. Everything went great. I didn't have serious issues on the way back. The games themselves were a lot of fun to watch, especially live. They were very, very competitive. Certainly more competitive than some of the ones that I saw in the second week of the USFL, especially the Tampa Bay game. That was pretty much a blowout from start to finish. But I'm still watching them games on on TV. They still have major TV coverage with Fox and NBC and a few other stations. So what's not to like? It's spring football with guys that have played a lot of football and for one reason or another didn't make it into the NFL. It doesn't mean they're not talented. It doesn't mean that they didn't deserve a shot at playing in the NFL. And I imagine before everything is said and done, and hopefully the USFL will last for the entire season, some of these guys will get offered NFL contracts. And based on the level of play that I saw, a lot of them deserve at least a chance to play for the NFL. And the thing that intrigues me is not so much this year. Hopefully, the USFL will complete this season, which would be the first alternate football season or football league to complete a season in a while. There's been various problems between lack of funding, people just dropping dead, getting sick, pandemics. It's like, yeah, we can't keep this league going, so we're just going to shut everything down. And it looks like the USFL, with their TV money, may be able to complete at least one season. And it's good that they've decided to play them all in Birmingham for this season. Would attendance at the various stadiums be better if the home teams played in front of the home crowd? More than likely, very much so. You look at the amount of people that go so far to the two games, the most heavily attended of the 2 weeks so far have been games that had the Birmingham Stallions in it, which again is not a big surprise. Oop, I need to scoot over here. Come on. What are you, oh, for God's sake. Oh, this stupid woman slowed her ass down and I couldn't scoot over. Darn it. And now I'm stuck. Oh well. Not much I can do about it. I suppose I'll just have to wait until the light turns red and I can get over. Such is life. There are worse things to have happened. But yeah, attendance is going to be not great until, there we go. It's going to be not great until the leagues can spread out a little bit more. But really, the most important part is going to be money. Can the league keep going at their current level of funding? Because none of these leagues are, or at least the USFL and the XFL and some of these other leagues, aren't dependent upon the number of butts and seats in the stadiums to survive. It's been about TV money. That's how you pay the bills. Certainly not at the kinds of prices that the USFL is currently charging, which is $10 and $25 to attend the games, and kids are free. So, you know, it's, what are you going to do? You can't, unless you can fill every single seat every single time, you're not going to make a profit on a football game with ticket prices that low. And you can't charge more or too much more without people deciding that it's not worth it to go see at that price, especially if all the games are being played in Birmingham and neither team that's playing is the home team. But where it's going to get tricky is next season, because the XFL is looking like it's going to come back next season. And if they do, and depending on when schedules are set up, there's going to be some crossover time between the XFL and the USFL, as well as competing for many of the same players that, you know, if they've shown themselves to have talent in the XFL last year, in the USFL this year, then people are going to want to sign them up for either one of those leagues next year. I mean, it just makes sense. You want to have the best possible team that you can get. And what I'm concerned about is how this is going to affect the finances of both leagues. Because ultimately, these leagues need to make a profit, or at least break even. And if they can't break even, then at least break even, then they're not going to last. And if they're not going to last, then what is the point in following them? So expenses have to be kept low. So I think what I'd like to see is these two leagues merge, play at the same time. Now next year, the XFL is having their practices at the same, you know, in one place, and probably their preseason games in one place. But they're talking about having their teams go to their home stadiums. Okay. Well, if they can do that and keep the costs low enough to justify it, then great. If they can't, then they're in trouble. So what I'd like to see is a merger between the two leagues. figure out where the teams are, what sense it makes to have teams in various areas, whether they're, it's certainly not teams in the same cities. That makes no sense. You don't want to split your market, which is kind of what could possibly happen. So the XFL should go to cities where the USFL is not. And there's plenty of cities out there that the USFL doesn't have teams in. Off the top of my head, you have Washington, D.C., or the D.C. area. You have pretty much all of Ohio, including Columbus, Ohio, which hasn't had a good NFL team, as well as Canton. The Akron-Canton area doesn't have a team, hasn't had a team. And as you go further out west, you have Denver doesn't have a team, Chicago doesn't have a team. So all of these big cities that don't have teams, I think the XFL should be in. And then, have some cross league rivalry. AFC, NFC. And have some teams play teams in the other league. Figure out what rules that you want to put in that's going to be acceptable to both leagues, and then just get it done. There's certainly, the USFL has 8 teams. There's no reason why the XFL can't come in with 8 to 10 teams, and the USFL maybe expand to 10 teams, and have a decent amount of coverage across the United States to keep people interested in watching the games on television. And don't bother with the stupid blackout rules and all the rest of that, because again, having butts in seats isn't the important part. The important part is the TV money. So sell the tickets really cheap to attract people to come and watch the games locally, but don't sweat it. Don't even worry about it. The other thing is, don't go to these big NFL stadiums. The XFL was smart in that they played in stadiums that had 20 to 40,000 capacity. Stay in those stadiums. You're not going to fill NFL stadiums. So don't even bother to try, because it looks really, really bad when you can't even fill a stadium 1/4. And if you have a stadium that has 80 to 90,000 people, you may not even get that. But a stadium that is 20 to 40 and you get 5 to 10,000 people, that looks pretty good. Or at least better. So, yeah, I would like to see a merger between the two strongest spring leagues so that they're not at cross purposes. Don't be at cross purposes and you could survive. American football is a fun game for at least Americans to watch, and there's a lot of interest overseas as well. But don't go overseas. Build your product in your strongest market. Don't go to Canada, don't go to Mexico, don't go to Hawaii, don't go to Alaska. All these places that, logistically speaking, it can be very, very expensive to field and support a professional football team. Why do that to yourself? Other leagues have tried that, and it has failed miserably. Specifically, the World Football League, they had the Hawaiians, and the World League, what did they call it, of American football, that had teams in Europe and teams in the U.S., and it just wasn't sustainable. You couldn't have teams made up mostly of European players that would be able to compete with teams of American players when the American players have had the advantage of, you know, years and years and years and years of playing football. That kind of thing takes time. I mean, you look at how many American, European football, soccer as we call it here, players do you have over in Europe and playing outside of the US? Not that many. And it's not that there's not lots of good, talented athletes. It's that these are skills that have to be developed from a very, very early age, and it just takes time. So in time, yeah, you know, you could, if there are European players who have the talent, then you could field a team mostly made of Europeans. But that time is not now, and not to compete on the same level as American players. It just, you know, you can talk about equal opportunity and equal outcome and all the rest of that, but it's, you know, it's just not there yet. Well, that went on much longer than I thought it was going to. I was mostly just going to very briefly mention the USFL and then move on to something else. But instead, I spent most of my time talking about it so far. So here's what's next. Not so much about football. My son Peter is going to Universal Studios with some of his friends at the end of May, very early June. And at first I was thinking, oh, it would be great to go and spend a day at Universal Studios, not the entire time. They're going to go for 4 days, and frankly, I would be, even for a single day, I'm kind of a third wheel. I'm the old guy that holds them back because they want to go and do all the things that they do, and that's fine. You know, I'm not even going to pretend that I can keep up with those guys. But the problem is Tracy's going to Idaho and spend some time with her mom and hopefully see her grandniece, who was just born to her sister Kelly's oldest boy, Michael, and his wife Haley. Congratulations, by the way. And she's not getting back until around the time that I would be leaving. And I don't know how well that's going to work out time-wise. You know, things can go wrong, and she could not be able to make it back on time, or want to stay a few extra days, or what have you. So I'm rethinking my plans, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work out yet. I still want to go down to Florida, and I still want to spend at least a day going to Disney, because it's their 50th anniversary, and I went 50 years ago. 50 years ago in 1972, I went to Disney World, of course, with my parents, because I was only 12 years old at the time. Please. And so yeah, all the politics and other stupidity aside, I would like to go to Disney World this year. And the only way I can do that in a way that isn't going to be weird is if I have people to go with me. So my nephew Jeff and my brother Bill, who live, and actually my other nephew Bill as well, that all live in the Daytona-ish area. Well, Jeff has kids that are young enough to appreciate going to Disney World. So I'm hoping that whenever it is I make it down there, that at least a couple of them would be interested in going with Uncle Guy, Grand Uncle Guy, however that works, to Disney World for the day. And that's the plan. That's what I want to do. And then I also want to go down and of course see my brother Bill and my brother Larry down in Palm Beach, and some of my friends that live down in the South Florida area that I went to high school with. Probably won't, like the last couple times I've gone down there, we've gone to this place called the Funky Buddha, which is a brewery in Oakland Park, Florida, obviously. And two of the people that I look most forward to seeing, Sandra and Tim, and I'm not saying last names, obviously, but they live hour and a half away or so from there. And the good sports that they have made that trek every single time. So this time, I think we should have our little mini reunion, whatever you want to call it, in their neck of the woods.